onto the computer. Okay, so welcome, a new Masechta Shavuos. So Shavuos, contrary to what it might sound like, something that we're more familiar with the word Shavuos is a holiday. It's not about the holiday of Shavuos. It's not in Seder Moyed, right? It's not in the section of Yom Tov, because it's not about a Yom Tov. It is about oaths. Shavua is an oath, right? When someone makes an oath. So there's a bunch of different types of oaths in Judaism. There's a bunch of different things. We're going to start off talking specifically about sometimes when it's actually something, we've talked about this before, how careful we are in Judaism about not making a statement, a promise, or a swearing type of statement, because what if it's not true? And it's very serious when you say something that's not true. So we're careful. Sometimes we say bli neder, right? Like that kind of statement, because we're careful about it. So now, in the beginning, we're going to be talking about that kind of thing. When someone says something, mostly we're talking about inadvertently, that they commit to something. Like I'm going to show up to the Tuesday class. Right, that's a commitment. That's a shvua. That's that, right? And and all of a sudden, something, a simcha comes up, and you can't be there, right? So what happens, right? There was a commitment that you didn't fulfill. And in certain cases, you would have to bring a sacrifice. If it was a real commitment, you would have to. So usually, in an inadvertent situation, you bring a carbon oil of yored. Carbon oil of yored, it means goes up and down. Why does it mean? What is the carbon oil of yored? What does it mean that it goes up and down? It means that it depends on how much you could afford. If you were a millionaire, so you had to bring the best of the best, and if not, you could even bring a bird as a sacrifice. That's the carbon oil of yored, and that's when it's done inadvertently. But the Mishnah, actually, the whole Mishnah is a whole blot. Beis Amud Aleph and Beis Amud Beis is the first Mishnah. I think there's only one Mishnah for the whole chapter. Chapter number 1. So it goes off into different things. But as we talked about by the Siyum, so we started off that Shavuos, when it comes to oaths, and in the halachic terminology in Hebrew, we call Shavuos bitui. Bitui means an utterance, that I made a commitment to something, or I made a statement about something that happened in the past. A bitui. I let it go out. I let something out of my mouth. Right? Bitui, an expression, a statement. So that's what we're talking in the beginning. So Shavuos, when it comes to these kinds of statements, so in the Torah, Shtayim. In the Torah, it tells us about 2 types of statements that are problematic if they weren't true, if they didn't come to fruition, really, right? And then Shehin Arba, that becomes 4 because there's 2 that the rabbis learned from it, that there's another 2, right? What is it? Just on a side, right? Just because you could learn it, Shavuos, Shtayim Shehin Arba, and move along, but we want to know what it is, right? So what's going on over here? The pasuk says, "Oy nefesh ki sishava levate b'svasayim lahara." If a person commits to something, Shavuot gives a commitment to something, bisvasayim, meaning he made it verbal with his lips, he made it verbal, lahara ilahativ, either in the positive or in the negative. So what does that mean? If someone commits that they're going to do something positive, or someone commits that they're not going to transgress something negative, a mitzvah say, mitzvah say, right? So that's the 2 that are mentioned in the Torah. We have a pasuk in the Torah, right? So now, that is future tense. The rabbis learned also in past tense that if someone said, I did such and such, or I didn't do such and such, right? I did this mitzvah, or I stayed away from transgressing the sin in the past. And they thought they did it, whatever. By mistake, they made that statement. They made that oath. So that also goes into the same category. So once the Mishnah is talking about Shtayim Shein Arba, so there's another few cases that are also that way. Yediyas HaTumah. The next idea is about knowing if someone is tummy. So this is, why do you have to know if you're tummy, if you're impure? Because you're not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash while impure, which is a big problem. And also, if you're a kohen, you shouldn't be eating consecrated foods. Truma, Levi with Meiser, shouldn't be eating that if you are impure. So, for example, you went to a funeral, you can't eat truma, right? That's why there's the kohen box, right? The paperman's is the kohen box. It's specifically the kohen shouldn't get tummy. The whole systems that are created for that, for that specifically. So Yediyas HaTumah. So if someone went inadvertently into the Beis HaMikdash, or inadvertently went and ate consecrated foods, so Shtayim, there's two things that are mentioned in the Torah Shein Arba, that the rabbis explained it in 4 ways, right? What's the two? The two, because it says in the pasuk v'nela mimenu, that it like was concealed from him, he forgot, v'hu tamei, that he forgot that he is tamei. So that is and what is that referring to? This is referring to v'hu tamei is referring to a person that forgot that he's tamei and goes into the Beis Hamikdash, or forgot that he's tamei and or not and, or, right? It's 2 scenarios. That's the shtayim, went and ate from consecrated foods, right? So that is, so what that's what it's mentioned in the pasuk. The extra 2 is that someone remembers that he's tamei, he just didn't realize that he's going into the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know how that happens, but that's the scenario. Or he knows that he's tamei, and the food, this could happen easier, right? He doesn't realize that this food there was two cakes next to each other. One was made out of flour that was truma, and the other one wasn't. And he ate the one from truma. He didn't realize, he knew he was tamei. He shouldn't eat the truma one. He thought that's what the one that he was eating. So that's the shtayim shein arba when it comes to impurities, when it comes to tuma. Now, this is another one, Yitzias HaShabbos, and this is actually the way Gemara Shabbos starts. Yitzias HaShabbos is also Shtayim Shein Arba. What's Shtayim Shein Arba? That there's 2, when it comes to Yitzias HaShabbos, means the going out on Shabbos, which is talking about carrying on Shabbos, right? So we know you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos unless there's an Erev. In a private domain, you're allowed to carry, no problem, right? Within a private domain, and if you make a bigger area into a private domain by putting up an Erev, so then you're allowed to carry, right? But in the pasuk, it talks about 2 scenarios, right? It's learned from the pasuk. It's not so clear from the pasuk, but it's learned from the pasuk. 2 scenarios, and the rabbis learned an extra 2 scenarios. What's the 2 scenarios? That only a scenario that you're taking from a private domain to a public domain. So if you're in the public domain, stick your hand into the private domain and take something outside. Right? So you're taking from the private to the public, or if you're in the private domain and you take something in your hand and put it outside, right? Those are the 2 scenarios that it mentions in the pasuk. It's based on a pasuk of Moshe Rabbeinu when they were bringing stuff for the building of the Mishkan. And he says not to bring anymore. So the assumption, the understanding is that is a concept of going from Rishus HaYachid, private domain, to Rishus HaRabim, to public domain. Okay, so that is the 2. Now, what about taking from a public domain into a private domain? Those are the 2 added. So whether it's someone standing in a public domain and putting it into the private domain, or he's standing in a private domain and sticking his hand into the public domain and bringing it into the private domain. Okay, so those are the Shtayim Shein Arba, the 2 that becomes 4 when it comes to Shabbos. So another one, Maris Negoyim. So actually, this is connected with the Rambam that those who learn 3 Prakim Rambam. So we're learning right now the laws of leprosy, and this is today's Rambam is talking about this. So Maris Negoyim, when it comes to a Metzora, a leper, how do you know that he's a leper? Right. So there's psukim. This is Taita, straight Taita. There has to be certain signs on his skin. Right. So there is 2 signs that are mentioned in the Torah, Shein Arba, that the rabbis said that there's another. So both of the signs are white, right? But there are different types of white, whether it's a wool white or on, so a snow white or a wool white. Those are the 2 whites that are mentioned in the Torah, and the other colors are off white. One is an eggshell white. What was the other one? There was a certain paint or something that they used in the Beis Hamikdash, seed that they used in the Beis Hamikdash, that was a certain color. So those 2 colors were added. Huh? Isn't it plaster? A certain plaster. Yeah. So the pasuk talks about two colors. Seis u'baheres. Those are the 2 words in the pasuk. And then and there's added. So that's again Shtayim Shein Arba. There's once mentioned one Shtayim Shein Arba, they're going to mention another one. This is typical of Mishnayos, Gemara, etc. Right? So now the Gemara is going to discuss the concept of someone that becomes tamei, that is tamei, and when did he know? When did he know? And therefore, what's he obligated to bring? And then actually the Mishnah, it's a very interesting Mishnah. It talks about what gives you kapara. You know what kapara means? Atonement. What gives you kapara? What's ultimately what gives you kapara? That part of the mission is very geschmack to me. What gives you kapara? Is it tshuva? Is it the sacrifice? What's the actual thing that gives you kapara? Yom Kippur, right? So the mission, that's the end of the mission that we're going to learn today. But let's go. Let's move along. So as sheyesh ba yediyat chila. So when it comes to tuma, when it comes to impurities, someone that has knowledge originally, that what? That before he knew that he was tummy, right? He knew that it was impure. And v'yediyah basoif, and he knew afterwards that he was impure. But in Beitayim, hell in Beitayim, in between he forgot. Right? Think about it. How does he know that he has to bring a carbon? He has to realize afterwards that he was tamei, that he did something while tamei, right? So that's the idea afterwards. But if he didn't know before that he was tamei, so then it wasn't a shaygig. Then it was like a ayness. Let's say someone comes over to this is a kohen. He runs, he does his service in the temple. And someone comes over to him and says, you didn't realize, but you walked by such and such a house. There was an overhang. Unfortunately, there was a corpse there, and you were tummy because you walked down that street, right? He didn't know. That's ayness. That's not a shaygi. That's not that he knew and he forgot, and we can't blame him for forgetting. No, we can't even blame him for not. He didn't know. How is he supposed to know, right? So here, what are we talking about? When someone didn't know, it's that he knew first. He knew that he became tamei. Then he forgot, and then he remembered afterwards. Because if he didn't remember afterwards, so then what's he doing tshuva on, right? He doesn't even remember that he was tamei. So in that case, and that's the scenario that the guy should bring a carbon leviyated, right? His fix, so to speak, is that sacrifice, that carbon leviyated. Now, yes, but Yedei Batchila, if he knew originally that it became tummy, then by Yedei Basaif, and he didn't, and he doesn't remember afterwards, so now he can't bring a carbon. This guy can't bring a carbon. He doesn't even remember that he did something wrong. He doesn't know that he did something wrong, right? So what does the Mishnah say? There's the sa'ir. How does he translate sa'ir? The not the lamb, the goat, right? The goat. Remember, there's two goats on Yom Kippur. One is Lashem and one's Lazazel. So the one Lashem, that's Nasa Bifnim on Yom Kippur. That's the goat that's brought inside, on the inside. So he says, V'yayim HaKippurim, Taila, Achi Yivadaloi, V'yava Ba'el V'yedid. So it says, don't worry. Basically what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is telling you that goat, that Kodesh Lashem, that's going to cover the guy. Don't worry, you won't get punished. He says it will hold back the suffering, so to speak, right? Because that's what that goat, the Kodesh Lashem goat on Yom Kippur, that's what it's there for. It's there to atone for someone that did something, doesn't even know that he did it. He doesn't know today that he does it. But maybe one day he's going to remember, and at that point, bring a carbon leviyated, then bring the sacrifice that you're supposed to bring, right? Now, what about Ein Ba Yediyah Vatchila? What if he doesn't know before, right? He had no initial knowledge. Al Yesh Ba Yediyah Basaif, right? Someone tells him afterwards, right? Like I told you the scenario. Someone tells him after he went into the base of English, by the way, you walked down that block and you ended up under oil, you ended up under an overhang with a corpse. It means that you were tamei, so you did divine service in the temple while tamei, right? So, but he only finds out after. So then, Sar Nasa Bachutz. So then the goat that's brought on Yom Kippur, this is not the Kodesh Lashem goat. This is the Musaf of Yom Kippur. This is the Musaf of Yom Kippur. And V'yayim HaKippurim, and meaning the day of Yom Kippur, Mechaper, it atones this person. He doesn't bring a sacrifice because he's aynus, right? So that atones this person. Shenemar, Milvat Chatas Sippurim, Alma. שזה מחפר, זה מחפר. מה הפנים עם מחפר, אלא דבר שיש בו ידיעה, אף חיצן עם מחפר, אלא דבר שיש בו ידיעה, שיש בו ידיעה. So he says, so, and that's what happens. What about the guy that never knew? He's not talking about him. So that the Mishnah over here mentions that since the goat on the inside, the Kodesh Lashem, only atones for someone that ultimately realizes what he's done, right? So the same thing is for the goat that's done on the outside, meaning the Musaf goat atones for someone that found out that he did something wrong. Okay, so it has to be like a hakara, a recognition that there was something that happened. What about the things that we do and we don't even realize that we did something wrong? It happens. It happens to me, I think. Right? We do stuff and we didn't even realize that we did something wrong. Whether it's like a high level idea, like a tameh and going into the base of Mikdash. What if the guy never found out? What if the Kohen never found out and he did something, right? So what atones for this guy? What atones for this type of thing? So he says, there's the goats that are brought as the musaf of Yom Tov regalim, which means Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, right? The musaf of them, and the musaf of Rosh Chodesh. Now, why all of a sudden that? Open up the pasuk. You'll see whenever it says to bring that extra sacrifice, that musaf sacrifice on Yom Tov, it says l'chaper. It's there to atone. That's what the pasuk says. So the Mishnah here, it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanakama, the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. But the pasuk says l'chaper. Basing it on the pasuk, as we talk about it very, very often, right? It's all based on a pasuk. So now you understand. By the way, think about it. Even when we daven on Yom Tov, when daven musaf, it's connected to the musaf they brought in the temple. It's for those times that we don't even know that something happened. Right? It's always you didn't even realize that there was someone waiting by the crosswalk, and you just zip by with your car. Could someone? I mean, the police could give you a ticket for that, right? but in Judaism, what are you gonna do? How you don't even realize that you did something wrong. The karban musaf is what atones for that, and that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says that Siri Argalim Mechaprin, that the goats of Yom Tif atone for someone who has no knowledge of their mistake, of their transgression. So from the holidays, yes, but not the Rosh Chodesh Musaf. So says, but the pasuk says that Rosh Chodesh Musaf is atones. So what's the atonement for, according to Reb Shimon? We're now continuing on Daf Beis, Amud Beis. Alatar she'achal asatame. Someone that was pure and ate, meaning tar, he was in a pure state, but he didn't realize that the consecrated foods that he was going to eat, that it was tame, that it was impure. That's the second opinion in the Mishnah. The third opinion in the Mishnah, Reb Meir says, Kol eating all of these goats, meaning all the musaf sa'irs, the musaf goats. Right, we're talking about holidays, Yom Kippur, Rosh Chodesh, Kaprosan Shava al Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav. That this is it's an equal thing. It's all the same thing. Rabbi Meir says that all of them, all of them, meaning the outer one on Yom Kippur, the Musaf of Yom Tif and the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, it's all there to atone for a scenario where someone forgot and didn't know whether he ate the Tumah or he was Tameh and ate something pure, or he went to the Beis HaMikdash by mistake or something like that. That's what those Musaf sacrifices are for. That's the Meir's opinion. Reb Shimon, so he's actually this part of the Mishnah. This Mishnah very much more reflects a Gemara than a Mishnah, because it's not concise. And here, the Mishnah is quoting an earlier part of the Mishnah and is going to ask a question to Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon said, we learned already the opinion of Reb Shimon, that he says that that the goats of Rosh Chodesh, specifically Rosh Chodesh, the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, comes to atone the pure person, the Kohen that's pure, or the Levi that's pure, that ate consecrated impure, right? Vishel regalim mechaprin al she'ein bo yedia loy betchila v'loy b'seif, and the ones from the holidays, from Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, that is for something that a person did that he had no knowledge, not beforehand and not afterwards. V'shel Yom HaKippurim, and the one of Yom Kippur, Mechaper al she'ein bo yedia batchila v'yesh bo yedia b'soif. Yom Kippur is specifically for something that someone didn't know beforehand, but was alerted to it later. So he says, what happens? They ask Reb Shimon, what happens if the goat gets lost? The goat was designated to use for a certain musaf, right? And it gets lost. Can they switch it? Can they now take this goat and use it for another musaf, right? For another musaf. Shimon says, sure, no problem. You could switch it out. But he says, 1 second, but you made a difference in the different musaf. You made a difference in their atonement, right? If there's a difference for their atonement, how could you designated this one that it's going to atone for this kind of sin, and now you're going to use it for a different musaf, and it's going to atone for a different type of sin. How could you let that happen? Right? It doesn't work that way. Amar Lahan, so he says no, they do have a common denominator. All of these musafs have a common denominator. Kulam bain l'chaper al tumas mikdash v'kadashas. All of these musafs come to atone for tamei, for impurities, and when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, to the temple, and kadashim, which means consecrated foods. And therefore, since they have a common denominator, so you could interchange the goat between. The fourth opinion in the Mishnah is Reb Shimon ben Yehuda. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Aimer Mishmor. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says, the musaf of Rish Chodesh mechaprin al atar shachal satame. It atones, the Rosh Chodesh musaf atones for the pure person who eats consecrated food that's impure. Musaf Maisif Aleyan Shel Regalim, the Musaf of Yom Tif Mechaprin Al Tahar Shachal Satame Ve'al She'ein Ba Yedia Le'Betchila V'Le'Basayif. There's, when it comes to the Musaf of holidays, it's both. It's also the fact that it's for the person, the pure person who ate the impure foods, and also the person who inadvertently did something and he still has no knowledge about it. He didn't know before, he didn't know after. And there's an extra added one when it comes to Yom Kippur, the Shein Mechaprin al Tar Shel Chatame, Ve'al Shein Ba Yediyah Le'B'Tchila V'Seif, Ve'al Shein Ba Yediyah B'Tchila V'Yesh Ba Yediyah V'Seif. When Yom Kippur, it atones for both of those scenarios, but also the scenario of the person who didn't know in the beginning, but finds out later on that he did something that needs atonement. Amrullah. So now they turn to Reb Shimon and they ask him, what's your opinion if the animal gets mixed up, and can we mix if it was designated to be a certain musaf, can we use it for a different musaf, right? Are you allowed to mix it in that? Amar Lam Hein, he answered yes, that you could. Amar Layim Kain, Sheyem Kippurim Krevim Rashi Chadashim. So he says, okay, so we could understand that the Yom Kippur one could be used for Rosh Chodesh because it has that atonement in it. How could you use the musaf sacrifice that was designated for Rosh Chodesh to use it for Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur adds an extra atonement, and this animal was only supposed to be used for a certain atonement. So how could you add an extra atonement on top of that? Amarlan, he answers the same answer. Kulam boin l'chaper al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. They have a common denominator. What's the common denominator? That they're all used for scenarios of a person that's tamei, a person that goes into the Beis Hamikdash inadvertently, a person that eats something, it's consecrated foods inadvertently. So now the Mishnah continues. What about someone that does it on purpose? Here, until now, we were talking about someone does it inadvertently. Ashayik, he forgot, right? He didn't know what he forgot. What if someone knows that he's tamei, and nonetheless, on purpose, goes into the Beis Hamikdash, right? So what is this guy now? He wants to do tshuva. So for this person, sar anasa bifnim. The goat that was with Kodesh Hashem, the Yom Kippurim, and the idea of Yom Kippur, the day of Yom Kippur, those two things help this person atone. Mechaprin help this person atone. So that is, till now we're talking about very unique scenarios that me and you will never come into contact with. Maybe when Mashiach comes, we'll all become Kohanim. Yeah.
Why would he want to atone for something that he knew he was doing this wrong?
Afterwards, he wants to do tshuva. In the moment, he was he was trying to, he was pompous and whatever. And then he realized, I should really do tshuva on that. And he's trying to figure out. He comes to Bezdin and he says, what could I do to atone for something that I did that I shouldn't have done? Yeah. I sometimes do something that in the moment I'm like, I don't care. And then later on say, 1 second, that wasn't so nice. I should really apologize for that, right? On all other sins. So until now, we're talking about a very unique scenario. Again, that doesn't apply in today's day and age because we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. And if you're not a Kohen or a Levi, it won't apply to you, even if there was a Beis Hamikdash, right? But so what about other things that people transgress? So she says, Hakalis v'chamuris, the serious ones, the not so serious ones. We're going to talk about what's serious and what's not serious. The inadvertent ones and the on purpose ones. Hoida veloy hoida. Things that people knew about or didn't know. Asay veloy saseh. Positive commandments, negative commandments. Krisos. Something that someone would be liable for kares, right? We talked about that in the last Masechta. Mrs. Bezdin, someone that would be liable to capital punishment. For all of those things, the soir, the goat that sent down the mountain, right? That second goat, the scapegoat, exactly. The scapegoat is what atones for that person, right? So, for example, let's say someone did something, and technically he would have to bring a carbon oil leviated, right? But he didn't get around to doing it, and all of a sudden Yom Kippur comes, and that scapegoat was sent down the mountain, right? He doesn't have to bring that carbon anymore. That's one of the things that this part of the Mishnah brings up. A regular Yid, a Kohen, or even the Kohen Gadol, Kohen Mashuach, a Kohen that was anointed with the oil. Right? Ma bein Yisrael l'Koyanim l'Kohen Mashuach ela shapor mechaper al Koyanim al tumas mikdash v'kadoshav. What's the difference between a Kohen? Just that the Kohen has this atonement that comes with. There's also the bull that on Yom Kippur is brought, and that gives a certain atonement to the Kohen. Reb Shimon Omer, Keshem shadam asoyer anasa b'fnim mechaper al Yisrael, kach dam apar mechaper al Koyanim. So do you really think that it's the blood of a sacrifice that is what brings atonement? The Mishnah ends off, and this is the important part. Kishem sha'avidoi shel soir ha'mishtalech mechaper al Yisrael, kach vidoi shel por mechaper al Koyanim. That really, what's it? Reb Shimon comes and tells you that it's not the sacrifice, it's not the animal, it's not the slaughtering of the animal, the pouring of the blood that comes from the animal. That's what brings atonement. It's the vidoi. What's the vidoi? The confession, right? That is what brings. So that's what the Kohen Gadol does, etc., in order to bring atonement for the Jewish people. This is something we actually say on Yom Kippur. It's in the davening Yom Kippur, say the Avodah, because that is what brings the atonement, the confession, the vidui, the annunciation of the vidui. That's what brings atonement for the Jewish people, and so too with the with the bull, also brings atonement for the Kohanim. And just to end off that, to understand that even for us, that it's not the act of the carbon musaf or any carbon. What is it? It's what we're going to do. If we're going to say, Hashem, I want to be better. I want to do this better. That's the idea. Tshuva is about saying that tomorrow is going to be better. That we finish the Mishnah, and next week we'll continue from the Gemara, which is on the bottom of Beis Amud Beis. Yeah.